Fear of marketing older. And that is driven by FOGO, which is fear of getting older.
For the next decade, the population over the age of 65 is going to increase by 40%. So unless you start paying attention to that demographic, you're going to leave a lot of money on the table.
Not only are you not targeting people, but if you're defaulting to very easy stereotypes, you're not going to be able to get your message across.
The same generalizations that boomers are experiencing are the same ones that millennials are experiencing. It's not a particular thing. I think that one of the problems are boomers are a diverse population that people are still learning about, similar to millennials.
We are the forerunners of a reinvention of what it means to age.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, The Zoomer with Marissa Lennox.
Welcome to The Zoomer, I'm Marissa Lennox. Do you see yourself reflected in today's advertising? When you turn on the TV or when you walk into a store, do you see yourself in the marketing directed at you? If the answer is no, it's likely because Zoomers receive a fraction of targeted ad spend, despite controlling a majority of consumer spending. On today's show, we'll discuss why Zoomers are an audience worth pursuing in virtually every category, and whether or not marketers are making a mistake overestimating the value of connecting with younger cohorts. But before we dive in, let's tee up the topic.
Zoomers are cashed up and willing to spend. But advertisers don't seem to care. Instead, millennials earn 5 times the spend from marketers compared to other groups. Big mistake. Here's why. Unlike Zoomers' parents and parents' parents, whose attitudes to spending were more frugal, Zoomers grew up in the era of the Beatles and Woodstock and were encouraged to spend freely. Today, they account for 60% of consumer spending and control 70% of the nation's wealth. Yet, they received less than 10% of targeted ad dollars last year. Bottom line, Zoomers are an economic powerhouse. Advertisers are missing the forest for the trees.
So David, I want to spend a bit of time understanding who the boomer, Zoomer, consumer is. And maybe, you can paint a picture for us through the lens of how do boomers behave differently from, say, their parents and their grandparents at the age of, say, 50, 60, 70.
The difference is that the things that used to happen at certain ages are now happening later and later. And the expected behavior, the stereotypical, when you're this age, this is what's going to happen, has been blown up by the baby boomer generation. And the most remarkable evidence of that is that they're not retiring at 65. So in the past, when the boomers were in their 20s, their grandparents at 65, it made no sense for Don Draper to advertise to their grandparents because their grandparents were literally going to be dead in 10 years or less. All their brand choices, all their spending patterns were well locked in and they weren't going to be around much longer. Today, a 65-year-old in Canada who has decent health is 50-50 to make it into his or her 90s, and the fastest growing age group in percentage terms, centenarians.
Right. So then how do millennials and boomers compare? Say when boomers were young, did they behave differently than, say, millennials are today, Jeff?
I think things have changed so much, particularly with social media and internet, which we never had when I was growing up as a millennial. So things are much more instant gratification, in the moment. Things like appearance is way more important for millennials than it was for back in the day when I was that age, because you didn't have selfies and things to take. So very different in terms of the way people look at things.
But let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that is money. I mean, when you were 20, David, how much money did you have, right?
Well, it isn't only the money. It's when I was in my 20s, and I'm a baby boomer, obviously, you were leaving your parents' home, you were getting married, you were having kids, you had your first home, and you could actually afford to buy a house. with the wages of that time and the prices of that time. Millennials did definitely get a raw deal there. So what's happening is the millennials do not have the same economic firepower that the baby boomers had at that age. And the mismatch is that the marketers look at the age and say, at that age, this is what's supposed to happen, this is what they're supposed to spend. It's happening 10 years later, 15 years, so there's a misalignment between what they think is going to happen at that age and what's really possible at that age.
What do you think?
I definitely agree that people are putting a huge focus on marketing to millennials, but I think a big component of that as well is because they see the potential in the generation. I think the biggest misconception, there's usually this kind of one-dimensional perspective on the millennial generation. Millennials make up 2 decades. So I think not only did we emerge in a time where technology was literally what we know and what we grew into, but I think that we are also opening up new ways for people to buy, for people to see. We are all about experiences. We are all about consuming things differently. And we're not afraid to say that I'm not going to be loyal to this brand unless they are taking a stand and they are going to actually accommodate some of the things that we really care about.
I want to add that marketing has changed. Clients that come to me, I'm not targeting a segment in the same way that I used to in the past. I'm looking for consumer need states. So what is the need that this brand is filling? What does that look like? What does the consumer think, feel, do? And that's how I'm targeting them. So I would say even boomers are buying loyalty programs for experiences, not rewards. So it's not just millennials that are interested in experiences. And that's where I think there's a fault where we kind of paint big paintbrush and go, there's one attribute, and that's the attribute that we're targeting on. People are more diverse. You know, someone might be a mother, but she's also a runner, and she's also, you know, a craftsperson or doing other things. You're not defined by your age alone.
Some of the research we did, we asked marketers, this is US data, what percentage of consumer spending they thought was split amongst millennials, Gen X, and boomers. The numbers that we saw, US data, so boomers were largely ignored, and marketers believe that millennials account for 39% of all consumer spending. They only account for 18% of all consumer spending. So one of the big reasons why boomers and zoomers, active ages, are ignored, because marketers, business people don't understand where the money is, and that's like a basic business.
And it's not just about spending money against this age cohort. It's also about how we're representing as marketers this age demographic. So if you choose to be lazy as a marketer, for lack of a better term, and portray them as weak, frail, incompetent, you're gonna turn people off, right? So not only are you not targeting people, but if you're defaulting to very easy stereotypes, you're not going to be able to get your message across. This demographic is vital, has a great sense of humor, a little mischievous at times. That's all very relevant to this demographic. And when our advertisers choose to portray them in this light, this is when people start receiving the message better.
And it is affecting their bottom line, and we will talk about that. So when we come back, why Zoomers are getting ignored, that's next.
I look at beer, where boomers buy more beer than any other age group. Good luck finding a single baby boomer in any beer commercial. It's the same. Millennials.
Welcome back. Earlier today, David Cravit, Vice President of ZoomerU, and I spoke with Bob Hoffman, author of the popular blog, The Ad Contrarian, and a well-known advertising professional, now an outspoken critic of the industry, from our 360 camera studio about why advertisers are missing the mark. Here's a clip from that interview.
If the advertising agency business, and certainly the marketing departments, are run on the dollar, it almost flies in the face of reason that they would leave this kind of money on the table year after year.
It does. It makes no sense. And there is such prejudice built into the system. It's hardwired that you have to advertise toward young people. And it doesn't matter what the data is. It doesn't matter what the facts are. In fact, I was talking to a very high up person in the television industry in the US. And he would go around to marketers and he would show them the data. He would show them the facts. And I'm sure you've had the same experience probably. Here's what it is. And they would sit there and they'd go, yep, that's right. You're right. You're absolutely right. And then they would do nothing. It's just, I can't explain it. I wish I could.
If you had, you know, all of the CMOs of all the major ad companies in the room, and you had an opportunity to speak to them directly, what would you say?
I'd say, you're idiots. You're idiots. You're ignoring the most important market in the world, particularly here in the U.S. In the U.S., people over 50 are the third largest economy in the world. People over 50 are bigger than the entire economy of Japan, the entire economy of Germany, the entire economy of India, and you're ignoring them. How stupid can you be?
Rosie, I'm going to put you on the hot seat here.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
You're in advertising.
Yes.
Why? Why is this happening?
It's interesting. We've had this conversation around, are we ignoring this audience? I don't think we are ignoring this audience because it depends on the product, right? Products are designed for specific needs that they're filling. So then it's back to the data point that you talked about earlier. If there are groups of people that are open to buying a product and that's your source of volume, then you're foolish if you're not advertising towards them. And what's happened now with data and insights, we have more access to more data, more information. We look at behavior. I target based on digital. I'm not targeting based on an age group. I am targeting on behaviors, sites people visit, the things that they do. Do they fit the profile of the consumer I'm trying to target? That's what I'm doing. I'm not targeting millennials or boomers or whatever audience it might be.
With respect, that may be true within your ad agency, but by the time it gets to the media buying company that puts out specs to which radio station are we going to buy, which TV station are we going to buy, our audience may not know this, but we're getting RFPs all the time, and they're strictly by age group. And they want to say, I want to see your station's numbers based on 18 to 34, 25 to 49. There's a targeted age group. Millions and millions and millions of dollars of media purchases, regardless of what you're doing strategically. By the time it gets to a media buy, here's my money, run my commercials, it's strictly by age.
But you
so is there an obsolete structure?
You want to
there?
know why? It's because most marketers look at income levels.
Right.
And income levels for somebody in that age demographic, you can't look at income levels. You have to look at savings. You have to look at home wealth. Right. You know, this demographic has over $1 trillion in home equity locked up in their homes that they could have access to. So there's huge spending power. But if marketers are just looking at incomes, I want to target people who are making, you know, household income over 100K. This demographic is going to fall out of that.
So you're saying that
advertisers as well, right?
You're saying that advertisers don't get that boomers have the wealth?
You heard it earlier. You tell them the stats, and they're still not getting
and
it.
I've got a theory as to why that is, and Bob Hoffman couldn't get it. There's two pieces. One, I call it FOMO, not fear of missing out. It's fear of marketing older. And that is driven by FOGO, which is fear of getting older, which people fear getting older more than they do of dying. So people look at old age, getting older, as a battle. And it's like, I don't want to go to the doctor because I'm worried they're going to find something that's wrong. It's like, as marketers, I don't even want to think about marketing to older people because intrinsically I worry about that. I don't even want to go there.
Rosie, you dispute the fact that that advertisers aren't targeting boomers. But Vivian, do you see yourself reflected in ads?
I am seeing a recognition and an improvement on that. I was just thinking about the advertisers. Let's say for L'Oreal, you have Helen Mirren. You have May Musk, who is the mother of Elon Musk. She is a beautiful woman, and I don't know her age, tall, statuesque, white hair, and so on.
But there's still a bit of a stereotype there. They're beautiful women, right? Are they truly reflecting what consumers look like as you're aging?
But you haven't explained to me why advertisers aren't targeting this demographic. I mean, I've heard because they don't think that they own the wealth. I mean, my impression of it is that the boomer demographic is in fact just too large and too diverse, and advertisers don't even know where to start.
And that's where what I'm saying is I would never do it because it is such It's a heterogeneous audience. Why would I paint them with a token brush that I'm targeting boomers, so I'm hitting you?
When all is said and done, the money flows. And the money is flowing based on age, and it is not reflective of where the spending power is. That's just a fact of life. That's the money that ad agencies and media buying companies are dispensing on behalf of their clients, and they're buying age. By the time the media requests come into this building here saying, here's your radio station, give me a quote, here's your TV station, give me a quote. It's 100% based on age.
But how much is your media kit to that media agency about age? Right? That's also how the media platforms and channels are marketing themselves as much.
That's what they're looking for. But we promote Zoomers here as Canada's most powerful audience.
Right.
And we are making headway. I think we are making it to Vivian's point. But another issue too is, do you see yourself, and we've run numerous focus groups, do you see yourself when you look at the commercials, do they even know that you exist? I personally, this is me, I look at beer where boomers buy more beer than any other age group. Good luck finding a single baby boomer in any beer commercial. It's the same. Millennials, a decade after decade, nothing's changed. Our cars, basically, with few exceptions, nothing's changed.
Okay, when we come back, the one industry you think would be the most youth obsessed might actually be getting it right. We'll tell you who. That's next.
We're going to talk about things like the beauty industry or the film industry. We really need to talk about the fact that we are now at a time where we are demanding more than it just being about ageism and about different generations.
Welcome back. The one industry that you'd think would be most youth obsessed, beauty and fashion, has actually been quite receptive to changing to include Zoomers in their marketing. Increasingly, we're seeing the ranks of Zoomer style stars grow, with icons like Jane Fonda, Joni Mitchell, Joan Didion as the face of major brands. So isn't this a sign that it's getting better, Doug?
I think it is getting better. And I know a number of high-end car dealers doing real research on how they might have to adapt their designs a little bit for an older population, and that's reality. And then other consumer groups actually undertaking researchers where they may hire a group of older consumers and put them through a test store and watch their behavior, watch what things might have to change. Because the reality is that businesses do need to change a little bit for an older consumer. Let's face it, although we're still pretty active, our hearing goes, our sight goes, and there are adjustments that need to be made, and businesses need to start to account for that. But I've noticed a real change over the last 2-3 years.
Fashion and beauty, that's one industry that's doing it right. But Jeff, what do you think?
I want to talk about the fast food business, if I could, for a second, and McDonald's. So we've come up with the dirty dozen myths of aging, which we think these are the myths, the stereotypes, stigmas that are out there, primarily in society, but marketers, most of them are young and they see this. So I think we are starting to see more advertising marketing towards boomers, Zoomers, active agers. But then you get kind of the content and the myths come into play. So I looked at the latest McDonald's ad, which kind of looks at two myths. One is that it's an older couple who are meeting at McDonald's and they're single and they're using technology, whatever dating app, to meet for the first time. And it's like, great, these people are engaged. This is who we're talking about. And then it immediately goes to, and save 20% off your coffee. I'm sorry, people are not going to McDonald's to save 20, if a cup of coffee is $1, you're gonna go have your date for the first time at McDonald's because I'm a senior, I don't have any money, so 20 cents is meaning a lot to me. No, I think the first part was great. It's like these older engaged people who are using technology to get together. McDonald's is a great place to have that first date, but not because you need a senior's discount. That's just, it makes no sense to me.
I think they're getting it right when it comes to fashion. We see wonderful role models and women out there. I mean, from the Jennifer Lopez's to women who are in fashion and in entertainment. You have major designers, Armani and Valentino, and role models who are still working today in their industries. You have women of all ages, Boomer Plus, Zoomers and Boomers, wearing leopard prints and fabulous looks and glitter and wanting to be out there.
But in all cases, especially in the beauty industry, to get back to, and I think you could probably endorse this, they are actually extending their product line. So the beauty industry, we had quotes 10 years ago from the president of Revlon predicting that the 70-plus market was going to be the, but what they've done is they said there's a skin treatment, there's beauty products, you know, for the millennial generation, chemically made up a certain way, their skin is a certain way, and as they get older, they need different products. So they are not just grafting Diane Keaton onto a product that existed for a younger demo. They're extending the products to accommodate that. The real problem that's remaining is when the product doesn't change, to use your McDonald's example, but the reason to buy that product is so grotesquely badly communicated, and we know why. Let's cut through. We know why. It's because the creative people that did the ad haven't got a clue about the generation that they're trying to communicate.
Well, I want to jump in because I think that, and again, I completely agree with what you're saying in regard to, I think we are doing a bit of generalization. I think in the beauty industry, it's not only a challenge in regard to marketing to different demographics. I think that diversity is something that is now demanded, and in regard to this conversation about diversity, integrating multiple ages, integrating multiple people from different generations that are not a particular type, going on Netflix and seeing more movies that are catered to, you know, mothers, to grandparents that have leading female or male roles, you know, I don't think that that's just about boomer versus millennial. I think that that's basically about how marketing has had to change in regard to the demands that we're requiring. When you look at the beauty industry, for example, Fenty is now a line that is probably one of the biggest in the world.
It's Rihanna's.
Rihanna. And that isn't just about ageism, it's about the fact that for decades, women could not find shades in their skin tone. It isn't just people that look like me, it's people that look like you. There are certain limitations to that. So I think that if we're gonna talk about things like the beauty industry or the film industry, we really need to talk about the fact that we are now at a time where we are demanding more than it just being about ageism and about different generations. We are in a time when we are talking about diversity and we're talking about how to do it.
And I mean, as marketers, you're not doing your job if you're not looking at what's happening in culture. And what is that impact of culture on the work that you need to be doing, and how can you resonate, and where your audience is?
Let me just introduce one other thought here. Everybody in this room is dealing with one interesting fact that unites us all, rich and poor, is that we are the forerunners of a reinvention of what it means to age. So on the one hand, you're getting chronologically older, but you're also more active. You're also traveling more. You're looking at I don't want to go to Georgian Bay and look at the waves in an Adirondack chair all day and get the early bird buffet. I want to climb Machu Picchu, and when I get there, there's 7 buses.
We call it rewirement, not retirement.
Rewirement. So there's a common thread, and everybody in this room, in your own way, whether you're going back to work or not, you know someone who is. This is the first time we've ever had in our country parent and child both receiving Canada pension.
Parent, child, and maybe even you know, there could be 3 generations receiving CPP at the same time.
Sweeping cultural changes that affect the entire generation, even
Right, but
with
not just boomers.
Just
society as a whole.
This generation.
We have factors that are influencing us.
But when I talk to brand managers and when I talk to creatives in ad agencies, having come from that world, there's very little. There's still a stereotype of when you reach this certain age, it means certain things. That's what it means, and leave me alone. And that's what needs to change.
The tendency to default to stereotypes is absolutely prevalent.
And the moment that you say, this is for you because you're old, which happens all the time, that is the last thing anyone wants to hear, no matter what age, because I'm never old, but that's not for me.
So we'll talk about how to address that when we come back. There's more after the break. Stay tuned.
It makes complete sense to have a massive program aimed at millennials. There's 10 million of them in Canada. Why would you ignore them? We're talking about balance.
Welcome back. We've been discussing the power of the Zoomer consumer and the state of advertising in Canada. So moving forward, what should advertisers know? What advice would you give to every CMO in Canada? And what is the future of advertising? Doug.
Well, I talk to businesses a lot about the older consumer, and the one number I tell them is, look, over the next decade, the population over the age of 65 is going to increase by 40%. So unless you start paying attention to that demographic, you're going to leave a lot of money on the table. Purely from the bottom line point of view, I do agree that we have to be careful about stereotyping just by age. I think the comments you were making about different segments, I think, are important. I think you probably segment the older population a little bit different than the younger population, though. So age still comes into it.
Depending on the product, right?
Yes.
It's
Probably
very much on the
depending on the
industry and the category and what kind of segmentation you need.
Yeah.
And there might be instances young and old people have the same attitudes and beliefs on those products as well.
I am curious, when boomers were younger, when boomers were the age that millennials were, did advertisers market to them?
Completely. They were the dominant target.
Yeah.
But that was because we used to focus on life stage marketing. So that was the trend of the day. Was there were milestones and moments that happened, different products that related to it. Mom was our superhero and the person that we targeted to for most of the products and services. So it was a way of working that happened then. Then we had a lot of change, and I'll say, you know what, I don't get clients who say I wanted to hit millennials. That's not what happens today. It did happen initially because it was new. And people didn't know who were they, how did you talk to them, how do you resonate with them. But today, I don't get briefs from clients that go, I want to hit X audience.
But we do.
And that's where I think there's a
But those clients that are
disconnect.
briefing you are telling something different to their media planning agencies, because they're saying, go out and buy me 25 to 44. They're doing it by age.
I know we've been talking a lot about Zoomers, but the thing that I hate about stereotypes is that everybody has children or grandchildren. You know what? I have no children. And no one's speaking to me either, right? So it's really trying to get at those truths about not everyone.
You sound like you need some love.
I need some love, you know? And it's really funny, we talk about that. People without children get no love. We get no love. So let's not just talk
for
about
example,
grandparents.
For example, in the beer industry, isn't it true that Zoomers consume more beer than millennials?
Sure,
And yet
by
you'll
a
never
wide margin.
see an older person in a beer commercial. Well, at least I haven't. I don't know if you have. I don't know that I ever have.
But I want to jump in. I want to jump in here. I
ahead.
think that we can all say that a lot of media is targeted young. I agree with that, but I think that it's not just because they're marketing to millennials. I think that we've always had this problem that we create skincare products so that everyone can look young. We live in a society that, as millennials are turning 30, it's the end of the world, and as people are getting ready to turn 50, it's the end of the world.
Excuse me.
I want to hold on, but I want to just say that the point that I'm trying to make is this is about boomers and millennials. It's about a lot more than that, though, because I have had so many people come up to me and be like, okay, we want to market to this demographic, so these are the generalizations about millennials. The same generalizations that boomers are experiencing are the same ones that millennials are experiencing. It's not a particular thing. I think that one of the problems are boomers are a diverse population that people are still learning about, similar to millennials.
We're talking about advertising dollars, but we're forgetting, if I'm targeting an audience, I might sponsor an event. I might have an activation. There's other ways that I'm reaching consumers, and just looking at TV or radio or print is not the only thing in my toolbox in terms of how I'm reaching audiences. I'm trying to find them where they are.
But let's also say one thing, and I'm in support of what you said. We're not talking about a zero-sum game. The millennials are as numerous a generation as boomers. Gen X is a little smaller in between the two. It makes complete sense to have a massive program aimed at millennials. There's 10 million of them in Canada. Why would you ignore them? We're talking about balance. We're talking about rebalancing the allocation. Not saying stop all work. Every single millennial is broke and has no spending power. They have much less spending power than the boomers, but so what? They're big. We're talking about balance. And the other thing about when you're looking at balance, there's also something called understanding and empathy that goes beyond the data. So you let off the segment by saying, what advice would you give a CMO in looking at targeting or maybe an ad agency, okay? My first rule would be, and I don't have no power over this, would be no copywriters under the age of 40.
Oh. Oh.
So,
Hey, what do you think, Dominique?
So here's my debate to that. You're telling me. So for years, I've worked on almost every automotive brand. I just got my license 2 years ago. So are you telling me as a non-driver I cannot market cars? It doesn't matter. My job was to understand who the consumer was, what motivates them, how important this purchasing decision is to them. Where do I need to show up? That's the due diligence that I think is missing that we're talking
But when
about.
I see an entire industry dominated, where all the creative work is coming out of young people and younger people, and I see miss after miss after miss after miss, then I begin to say, you know what? Where's the reality check? How did that McDonald's commercial where they're excited about a senior's discount on
Yeah, the stat is
who approved that?
Yeah.
Who approved
The
that?
stat is it's basically 6% of people working in an agency are over the age of 50. And you know, I'll say this. So one of the things that we started doing in my team was I actually outlawed the word seniors. Right? I'm
Labels
using
are
it
bad.
for now,
Call me
but
seniors.
I've outlawed it. But here's the thing. Do millennials like being called millennials? They don't, right? It's all about labeling, generalizations, and again, it is going back to empathizing and making sure, regardless of age, that we're putting ourselves in the customer's shoes so that we can best speak to them and we can best reflect them.
All right, well, when we come back, we'll take questions from the audience. That's next.
Accessibility being marketed as accessibility instead of actually thinking about it in terms of style and function.
Welcome back. It's that time in the show when we take questions from the audience. So, hello. What is your name and what's your question?
My name's Patrick Olive. My question is, why don't we go back to the real basics of housing and commercial development and look at the planners? I was driving around, I couldn't find a senior citizen because I have to have a hip replacement, a disability spot because they don't have enough right now. It's changing dramatically. So we have to change that in commercial and in residential. Being a developer at one point, why don't we offer a seniors package? These new condos, is there a seniors package when you walk in? No. Is there an upgrade of glass balconies and whatever? Yes. Anything that's, aesthetic or whatever, but no seniors package. That's right.
I wouldn't even say seniors package. I mean, one of the biggest growth areas is going to be people with disabilities in the next number of years. And so what are brands doing to accommodate the differences that are going to be happening? So I think it's not just seniors, it's in general people with disabilities, and that we know is going to be a segment that's going to continue to grow.
I think in every area of life, we're not prepared to meet the needs of an aging population.
93% of people prefer to age at home, right? So there are going to be things that have to be done to our homes to better enable that.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. You need supports for individuals that want to age at home, but we need to invest in home care. I mean, that's a huge problem. But what did you want to include on housing?
I was going to say the first thing. So I've asked this question because when you go into a lot of new developments, a lot of condos are the new big thing. People are buying them. They're getting smaller. They're becoming less accessible. The challenge in that is that developers are seeing a priority on quantity versus the actual value of individual units. And when you look at even accessibility units, they are being built, but there are certain things inside of them that they still have to create in a particular manner that will allow the unit to be sold to someone else. So I agree. I think that all condominiums should be built accessibly. I think that they should be built so that as we are aging, this is factored in. However, unfortunately, we're in a time right now where developers are not yet fully seeing the value in that. And I think one of the overall questions that I would say is, what is the way that demographics who are not being marketed to, that are not being accommodated, actually create a statement and create change? Is it that they stop buying from these builders or developers that are not building for them? Is it that they stop buying from brands who are not actually creating products for them? I think housing is like a priority and a great example of that.
But it's a lot easier though to refrain from buying a lipstick than it is from getting a house.
I completely agree.
Accessibility being marketed as accessibility instead of actually thinking about about it in terms of style and function, i.e., isn't that a gorgeous curbless shower, not, oh, this is an easy tub to step in
people
and
who
out,
have-
right?
Exactly, right?
So,
And that's the mindset and the
and,
shift
and,
that has
and
to
that
change.
that also has to permeate into that industry as well. And I'm seeing some contractors that are starting to think that way and think about it in terms, again, form, function, style, not just about
A home you can age
accessibility.
into, not that it's designed for you already
because
being
you're-
at a
This is
particular
also
age.
this is also going to be where you're going to see a synthesis of design and technology. There are ETFs now, there are hedge funds now investing in aging in place technology, that they are seeing just the technology monitoring systems, mobility systems, and they're putting millions of dollars into these new
the money's
companies.
going.
Yeah,
So
the
that
Internet of
aging in
Things,
place is
voice,
going to be a tech
yeah.
play, not just a
Oh, yeah.
altruistic play.
All
if you
right.
will.
All right. Well, when we come back, final thoughts from our panelists. That's next.
In a previous episode of The Zoomer, we discussed downsizing. On Twitter, Edgar writes, "Initially, it was difficult to start throwing things away when we downsized, but after I saw how much junk we actually had, it was pretty relieving. Hashtag moving out." In another episode, we discussed being active. On Facebook, Carol writes, "The worst thing to do as we get older is to start slowing down. Recently, I've picked up cross-country skiing. It's a tough workout, but it's also a lot of fun, too." Keep the comments coming in and connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and via email at rsvp@zoomermedia.ca. Don't forget, for free tickets to the show, go to www.universe.com and search Zoomer Media and log on to www.thezoomertv.com for full episodes and more.
Welcome back. We'll hear final thoughts from our panelists now, starting to my left, David.
I think the challenge for marketers is that when you look at the baby boomer generation, for the first time, we're seeing two forces that are out of sync. When I was in my 20s, the expectation for what was supposed to happen to you when you were in your 20s was happening to me. In my 30s, in my 40s, everybody in the room. Now, for the first time, it's out of sync because we're getting older, we're starting to encounter, maybe health problems or challenges, and yet we're finding it easier to be empowered. We're going to live longer. We're going to live longer better. And it's this clash of the expectations of an age and kind of, I'm not like that anymore of that age. And it's that clash of those two forces that I think is the number one problem that the marketing industry has not solved. We're seeing some improvement. They're getting there, but there's a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to echo David's thoughts about empowerment, and with a message to my fellow marketers, which is, recognize that this is a huge untapped demographic in terms of potential, in terms of both the time, the savings that they have, the untapped home equity that they could have access to. And then a message to our audience is maybe learn something from the millennial generation, which are very active and making their voices heard. So vote with your wallets, vote with your feet in terms of who you go and visit and what you use. Make sure that marketers and advertisers know that you support the advertisers and marketers who are representing you in the way that you feel is the right way. And that's how you create shifts in the marketplace.
Certainly, we heard about a lot of the challenges and the numbers you can squabble with. What I've noticed over the last number of years, there are changes about. Businesses are starting to realize they've got to change. Slow, perhaps, slower than many of us would like, but in a positive direction. And I think people are starting to realize that, the retirement is different today, as you made. The longevity economy, I like to think about, needs to focus on. And I think one of the things I'd suggest to businesses that perhaps they need to do is provide some training to their staff, often very young staff, perhaps in real estate and in marketing, about the new longevity economy and what it means. It's different. And I'm not sure they understand that, and perhaps some training and education might help move things along.
And I actually think this is an exciting time. It's an industry that's ripe for disruption. And there's a lot of unmet needs, clearly, that consumers are talking about. But I love what you said. It is on consumers to vote with their pocketbooks and voice their concerns. And if their needs aren't being met, how do they bring that to the forefront instead of just accepting what's happening with them in society? And they are on social media, and they are using technology. So that misnomer of that they're not digital is incorrect as well.
Marketers are making some progress. I see all the time that things are equalizing a little bit more now for the various generations, and the millennials and the Generation X's and the Zoomer and Boomer generation. They're getting out there more in directing their attention to the advertising dollars. My mother is 94 and she's on the computer. So if that tells you that, and she has lessons, so they have to realize that that's what they're doing today. They're totally out there with it, and we are, as a generation of Zoomers and Boomers, and that should be recognized and taken seriously.
Ageism is something society, a huge challenge for us, way beyond marketing. But for marketing specifically, it's really getting over those stereotypes and stigmas. And for me, I'd love to see us start with some taboo types of categories. Sexual health. Like, let's get into the times. People are having sex as they're getting older, and sexual health is a big issue. And then you look at one category, we rarely have large new categories that come on. Cannabis, right? Think about the needs that people have as they get older, beyond just getting high, although a lot of people, myself included, still like to get recreational, but there's all the aches and I probably shouldn't have said that, all the aches and pains, anxiety, sleep.
It's legal.
And where you look at where the efforts are, that is the largest market that is being missed, and I'd love to see some marketing efforts against that, breaking some of those stigmas and myths.
I think that we're in an exciting time. I think that the actual fact that we're sitting around this table and having this conversation is incredible. And I think that we have an opportunity to not only look at, aging populations that have needs that we have not yet met, but also to look at the challenges within our industries that are helping us reinforce problems that are not allowing us to cater to people over the age of 60, 65, 70, and also to all of the things that we think we know about people under the age of 30. I think that if we shatter our concept of what we think we know about different, demographics, and we redefine that with an understanding of unique qualities for each demographic, I think that we can move forward.
All right, well, a big thank you to my panelists. Thank you all for being here. To the audience in studio and at home, thank you for being with us. We'll see you soon. For now, it's time to zoom out.